World War II began over 70 years ago, so I've come to the one place where these epic old warbirds still lie, the National Museum of the United States Air Force in Dayton, Ohio. Follow me as we explore some of these historic defining aircraft. The Republic P-47 was the heaviest single-engine Allied fighter to enter production during the war. She would also be the most produced Allied airframe, with 15,579 airframes delivered. She was designed by Alexander Kartveli, the head designer at Republic Aircraft Corporation. She was heavily armed, bearing 8 50-caliber machine guns and up to 2,000 pounds of bombs or other ordnance. She was extremely well armored, bearing titanium armor and self-sealing fuel tanks, which gave her an aura of reliability unmatched by any other fighter during World War II. It was a popular saying amongst pilots that if you wanted to send a picture home to your girlfriend, stand in front of a P-51. If you want to come home to your girlfriend, fly a P-47. Her engine also boosted her reliability, being a R2800 double wasp. An entire cylinder could be shot out of this 2,000 horsepower engine, and the pilot would still be able to be flying home. The Messerschmitt Bf-109 was the most produced aircraft of all time, with over 57,000 total airframes made. She was quite heavily armed, bearing one 30mm cannon in the propeller hub and 2 machine guns just forward of the cockpit. She would serve air forces, including the Luftwaffe, from the early 1930s all the way to 1965, when the last 109s were retired by the Spanish Air Force. Ironically enough, the Spanish Bf-109s would have Merlin engines in them, which were popularly used by the British Air Force during World War II. Eric Hartmann, the highest all-time scoring ace, flew a Bf-109 named Karana 1. He scored 352 aerial victories, primarily against Russian opponents. In contrast, the highest scoring American ace, Major Richard Bong, would only score 40 aerial victories in his P-38 Lightning. Another German ace, who may or may not have been related to me, was Franz Dorr, who would score a total of 128 aerial victories against opponents, including Russians, during World War II. The Lockheed P-38 was designed by Lockheed's famed Clarence Kelly Johnson. She was heavily armed, bearing 4 50-caliber machine guns in the nose, as well as 1 20mm cannon. She was nicknamed the Fork-tailed Devil by the German pilots who flew against her. However, she proved to be relatively ineffective in the European theater in comparison to Mustangs and P-47 Thunderbolts. Many P-38s were instead sent to the Pacific theater, where they proved to be very effective against Japanese Zeros. The twin engines also provided an added amount of security to pilots over long ranges over the water. The Supermarine Spitfire was the RAF's premier fighter during the war. She was armed chiefly with 8 .303 machine guns, which lacked the stomping power of the American 50 calibers. She was powered by a Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, which gave her great speed, and her elliptical wing gave her great agility in a dogfight. This version, however, is used by reconnaissance for the Army Air Corps, because the U.S. Air Force already had P-51 Mustangs for her air superiority role. The Focke-Wulf 190 is considered by many to be one of Germany's best fighter aircraft. She could more than hold her own with any Allied aircraft, even up to the end of the war. She had great visibility from her bubble canopy and was quite heavily armed, bearing 2 20mm cannon and 2 machine guns. Her BMW engine was well built and could sustain several hits before being knocked out. And it was extensively used by WWII 200, a German special operations squadron that was comprised of the most elite German pilots in the Luftwaffe. The North American P-51 Mustang is considered by many to be one of the greatest fighters of all time. She would see service in World War II and even in later conflicts such as Korea. She went from design to a prototype minus engine in only 117 days. She was very well armed, bearing 6 50 caliber machine guns, 3 in each wing root. At her core was a Packard V1650 Merlin engine with 1,700 horsepower. She had a range of approximately 1,700 miles with drop tanks. When Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring looked up in the skies over Berlin and saw Mustangs, he calmly said, "The war is lost," knowing that with Allied fighter escort all the way to Berlin, the Luftwaffe would not be able to hold out against the Allied bombing offensive. The Messerschmitt Me-262A was the world's first operational jet fighter. She sported 4 30mm cannon in the nose, giving her unprecedented firepower. She also had 2 Junkers UMO engines, which gave her incredible speed. She could outrun any Allied fighter by over 100 miles an hour. She was literally one of the greatest aircraft of World War II. This aircraft is the once feared and later soundly trashed Mitsubishi A6M20. She was heavily armed, bearing 2 20mm cannon and 2 machine guns. However, she was very lightly armored, which led to many API hits, armor-piercing incendiary, 50 caliber rounds from U.S. fighters going right through her and igniting her fuel tanks, which resulted in a dangerous explosion, which usually crippled the aircraft. Later U.S. fighters could easily trounce the A6M20. However, early fighters such as the Wildcat at the start of World War II had one hard time facing off against this tough and deadly opponent. The British Bristol Beaufighter was one of the first night fighters of World War II. She was well armed with 4 20mm cannon in the nose and 6 303 machine guns in the wings. She had a large radar in the nose of the aircraft, which allowed her to pinpoint aircraft at night. She was a night hunter. She hunted in the darkness only by radar and gave birth to a new form of fighting. The Northrop P-61 Black Widow was the first aircraft built from the ground up to be a night fighter. She had a radar in the nose, and she was well armed, carrying 4 20mm cannon and 4 50 caliber machine guns. She was fast in the night and silent and deadly. The Northrop P-61 Black Widow is one of the most historically important aircraft of World War II, being credited with the final kill of the war on one of the last days. She would also see service later in life as a reconnaissance aircraft and as a chase plane for developmental aircraft. After World War II, aircraft evolved into the next generation of jet aircraft. While the technology of World War II is long behind us, the technology that came from World War II is all around you.